Hey, you're welcome to the Last Post channel, the world to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank
Moscow,
you for
Idaho,
watching.
a college town known for its charm, its safety, and its close-knit community. But in the early hours of November 13th, 2022, the peaceful facade of this quiet neighborhood was shattered forever. Inside this house on King Road, 4 young students were brutally murdered, a crime so shocking, so senseless, that it would grip the entire nation in horror. To understand the tragedy, we must first return to that weekend. A weekend like any other for college students. Football games, late-night gatherings, laughter echoing through the crisp Idaho air. Life was normal. Life was routine. And for 4 friends, it was supposed to be just another night of youth, freedom, and friendship. Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernadle, and Ethan Chapin. 4 friends, bound by youth, laughter, and a sense of belonging. They were students, roommates, and loved ones. To their families, they were everything. And within hours, they would be gone. On the night of November 12th, Kaylee and Madison spent their evening downtown, eating, laughing, enjoying the energy of their college town. Just a short distance away, Xana and Ethan attended a fraternity party, surrounded by friends and the easy rhythm of campus life. It was all so ordinary, so unremarkable, until it wasn't. At around 3 a.m., the 4 friends returned home to their off-campus house, a place that had always been filled with laughter and companionship. But in the silent hours before dawn, that home would become the stage of a massacre. Investigators believe the killer entered the house quietly, moving through the rooms like a shadow. The details that followed remain chilling: the sudden violence, the fear, the silence that swallowed the night. For lives ended in a matter of minutes, and the community's innocence was lost forever. By morning, the house was surrounded by police tape. News of the murders spread like wildfire across campus. Fear turned the air heavy. Parents called their children in panic. Students locked their doors, too afraid to leave. What had once been a safe haven was now a house of horror. The news broke quickly, but details were scarce. All the public knew was that 4 young students had been found brutally murdered inside their home. No arrests, no suspects, no weapon recovered. The silence from investigators only fueled the terror. At the University of Idaho, fear spread like wildfire. Who could have done this? Was the killer still out there? Rumors swirled, theories spread online, and with every unanswered question, panic deepened. Parents arrived in droves, demanding answers, demanding safety. Many students left campus altogether, unable to stay in a town now haunted by violence. Moscow, once thought of as safe, was now the center of a nightmare. At a press conference, authorities called the murders an isolated, targeted attack. But with no suspect in custody, their words brought little comfort. In fact, they raised more questions than answers. Online, armchair detectives dissected every detail. Who was the target? Was it personal? Random? A stalker? Theories piled up by the hour, each more unsettling than the last. And in the absence of answers, fear only grew. Inside the house, investigators began their painstaking work. Blood evidence, fingerprints, digital devices, every inch was examined. But the crime scene was complex, chaotic, and the timeline disturbingly narrow. Then came a critical lead. A white Hyundai Elantra spotted near the crime scene in the early morning hours. It was the first tangible clue. A car that could belong to the killer, or to someone who had seen everything. But while investigators searched for answers, the community grieved. Vigils were held. Candles lit the night sky. And 4 young lives were remembered, stolen too soon, leaving behind broken families and a shattered town. The investigation ballooned into one of the largest in Idaho history. Local police, state detectives, and the FBI all joined forces. Hundreds of interviews were conducted, thousands of tips poured in, and the hunt for the killer became an all-consuming mission. But the most haunting truth remained. Somewhere out there, the killer was free, watching, waiting, living among them. Investigators zeroed in on the car. a white Hyundai Elantra, model years 2011 to 2013. They believed whoever drove it might hold the key to the mystery, or be the killer themselves. Video after video, camera after camera, the car appeared, circling the neighborhood in the hours leading up to the murders, then vanishing, only to reappear as dawn approached. A breakthrough came when investigators traced the car to a man living just across the state line, in Pullman, Washington, a PhD student in criminology, Bryan Kohberger. For weeks, agents watched him. They studied his movements, his routines, his life. Outwardly, he seemed ordinary, but investigators were growing certain he was not. Bryan Kohberger was intelligent, articulate, and deeply immersed in the study of criminal psychology. But beneath the academic surface, investigators began to see a darker possibility, that he was using his studies not to understand crime, but to perfect it. Back at the crime scene, investigators uncovered a critical clue, a leather knife sheath, left behind in one of the bedrooms, and on it a single touch of DNA. The DNA was run through genealogical databases. It pointed investigators straight to Kohberger's family, and with it, the first undeniable link between the suspect and the crime. To be certain, agents collected DNA from Kohberger's family trash. The results were chilling, a near-perfect match to the sample recovered from the knife sheath. He had been hiding in plain sight, teaching about crime by day, suspected of committing one of the most brutal crimes in Idaho's history by night. On December 30th, 2022, more than 6 weeks after the murders, Bryan Kohberger was arrested at his parents' home in Pennsylvania. The town of Moscow exhaled for the first time, but unease lingered. When he appeared in court, the world saw the man accused of slaughtering 4 innocent students. Silent, expressionless, and unwavering, Kohberger's image would burn into the nation's memory. Yet, beyond the headlines and courtroom drama, the true heart of this story remains the victims, for young lives stolen, their futures erased, and their families left to carry the unbearable weight of loss. Cell phone records revealed what surveillance could not. In the months before the murders, Kohberger's phone had pinged near the King Road house over a dozen times, as if he was watching, studying, preparing. On the night of the murders, his phone mysteriously went silent between 2:47 a.m. and 4:48 a.m. When it powered back on, it pinged miles away, as if attempting to erase a trail that could not be erased. In his home, investigators found writings, digital records, and searches. His studies into the criminal mind seemed to mirror the very crimes he was accused of committing. Animal hair was discovered on clothing inside Kohberger's apartment. Tests suggested it was consistent with a dog owned by one of the victims, placing him, at least indirectly, inside their world. The car, the DNA, the cell phone, each clue strengthened the case. Individually, they were suspicious. Together, they painted a portrait of obsession, surveillance, and brutal intent. As the evidence piled up, Kohberger's defense pushed back. They argued contamination, coincidence, and bias, claiming the state was desperate for a suspect and built its case on fragile links. The trial, even before it began, captured the nation. Every hearing, every motion, every fragment of evidence was dissected by the media, turning a small Idaho town into the center of global attention. For the families, the proceedings were not about legal strategy, but about answers, about justice, about the unbearable grief of 4 futures stolen in a single night. Every piece of evidence returned the story to its origin, for students, full of life, who would never come home. Behind every court document, every headline, were the voices that would never be heard again. And still, he said nothing. No apology, no explanation, just silence and the weight of the evidence pressing down on him. By 2023, the case had shifted from investigation to litigation. Prosecutors built a methodical narrative, obsession, planning, execution. Every shred of evidence, from phone data to DNA, was lined up to prove intent. At the center of it all was the DNA, a single microscopic trace that prosecutors claimed tied Bryan Kohberger directly to the murders. The defense called it coincidence, contamination, even desperation. Experts testified about Kohberger's studies in criminology, noting his fascination with control, with the criminal act, and with the psychology of offenders. To them, his research was not academic curiosity, it was rehearsal. Through it all, Kohberger remained silent, detached, observing every word as though the trial itself was another experiment in human behavior. Outside, families clung to memories, while the world consumed the story as spectacle. Every headline, every podcast, every viral post turned grief into a public event. The legal chess match intensified. The prosecution pursued the death penalty. The defense claimed tunnel vision, that law enforcement ignored other suspects, blinded by their fixation on Kohberger. For the families, legal arguments meant little. They wanted accountability. They wanted to know why. And still, no answers came from the man accused of ending 4 lives. Prosecutors unveiled the reconstructed path of Kohberger's car, circling, waiting, moving with chilling precision. They argued this was not random, this was predation. Clothing fibers, footprints, cell data, car evidence. The picture grew darker. Each fragment might be explainable on its own. Together, they became damning. The defense reminded jurors of a truth in American justice. Suspicion is not proof. Doubt, even in shadows, must be honored. They argued the state's story was compelling, but not conclusive. In that courtroom, it became more than a trial. It became a test of evidence, of truth, of how far obsession can spiral into horror, and whether justice can ever bring peace. As the trial neared its conclusion, the courtroom quieted, but outside, the world refused to look away. This was no longer just an Idaho case, it was America's obsession. Yet beyond the spectacle, the questions remained, questions that no verdict could fully answer. Why these victims? Why this night? And what drove a doctoral student, obsessed with crime, to allegedly become the very monster he once studied? For the families, healing would never mean closure. Closure suggests an ending, but grief is endless. For lives had been cut short, and the world they left behind could never be the same. Online, the case became fuel for endless theories, speculations, and content. Strangers debated details, dissected lives, and argued guilt before a jury ever spoke. Justice was no longer confined to a courtroom. It was trial by internet. And then silence. The man accused waited behind bars, his fate sealed not by headlines, but by evidence, testimony, and law. Yet even in captivity, his shadow lingered over Idaho. In Moscow, life moved on, but it was not the same town it had once been. Fear had seeped into its soil, grief into its walls. The idyllic college town would forever carry the memory of that November night. And somewhere between the lecture halls of criminology and the courtroom of reality lies the chilling truth. Obsession, unchecked, can consume and destroy. Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernadal, Ethan Chapin, for young lives stolen in the dark, remembered in the light. The Idaho murders remind us that behind every headline lies human tragedy. Behind every trial lies broken families. And behind every monster lies a choice.
For watching.
A college